Chris David joins us now. He's a futurist, a tax consultant, and also speaks on leadership. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for
Let's start. Over the week, we've seen arguments go back and forth between the governor of Kaduna State, the Speaker of the House of Reps, and to the extent that they published their salaries in terms of what they earn. Now, we'll go take a look at that, and because you're a futurist and the tax consultant, we'll look at those, and you give us your impression about what you think about some of those that they have released. You've seen some of them. What are your impressions?
Well, there is a good development for the country, and when I examine the debate as was going on, I think we should take it from 4 different perspectives. So the first is transparency in government or governance. Then you talk about taxation itself. Then we'll talk about corruption, which is what is in the lips of so many people. Then we'll talk about leadership in Nigeria. Now, I'll start by saying that democracy as a government has been adjudged the best form of government because it creates the platform for us to debate our ideas. So I like the narrative of the speaker that says that he is not joining any issues with anyone, but let's just expand the issues. And that is going to be my starting point. Not joining issues or pointing accusing finger, but let's just expand the horizon of transparency generally in governance. So the first thing is, what is transparency? Now, I'm going to take a definition from the ISB framework, that is the International Financial Reporting Standard, that defines transparency as representing events and transactions faithfully. That is the definition of transparency in accordance with that the ISB framework. So what that means is that we talk about full disclosure. So in governance, it will not be out of place when people call for full disclosure of information, because we need to also understand what is government in the first place. This part of the world, government has been defined as a constituted authority. But we don't ask the question, who constitutes that authority? So the correct definition of government is that a government is actually a social agent that derives its legitimacy and powers from the consent of the governed.
All right. Now that they published those documents of theirs in terms of their salaries, but eventually we did hear, well, salaries for them may not be the key issue. But from what you've seen, were you in any way impressed about the compliance with the requisite tax requirements? So
yeah, I'm going to get to that, but let's get the framework right so that we'll not discuss out of context. So if government is a social agent, that means it should have a principal. So what that means is that those in power are actually stewards that should account for the resources that have been vested upon them to manage. So that brings us to the concept of governance, because governance in this part of the world, we've seen governance as the process of executing the business of government. But it's actually broader than that. Governance actually means the manner in which a society or a nation decides to manage itself or themselves. So when we call for transparency or full disclosure of information, is that we expect a two-way interaction between those that are agents and the principals that put them there.
Did you see a full disclosure of the emoluments as was displayed?
So that is, we'll now talk about taxation.
But did you see a full disclosure?
Yeah. Taxation, what they have published is a pay slip. That is not the full tax returns. And like someone was saying yesterday, he said there are other incomes that they ought to disclose.
Which are taxable too.
Yes. Now, going by that pay slip, if we assume that that is what they file as their tax returns, what that means is that the governor, if you can, okay, the pay slips are there, the governor of Kaduna State, based on his pay slip, that means the total tax he pays in a year is just about 1,024,000 naira. While the speaker, going by the pay slip, should just be somewhere around 650, 700,000. Now you ask yourself, is that the correct tax? So it brings up another argument.
Do you think it's the correct tax?
The argument would that be that do people actually pay correct tax or adequate tax? So that is a debate for those, let me say, so professionals.
Is correct adequate? Is adequate correct?
Now, from a tax expert point of view, there is nothing like as correct tax. You pay adequate tax. And I'll give you examples. Now, look at the Personal Income Tax Act, Section 2, talks about person whom tax is to be collected, and say there are 5 classes of people. Section 3 talks about chargeable income, that is defining the income that will be liable or assessed to tax. Then Section 19 and Schedule 3 of Personal Income Tax talks about income that is exempted from tax. Then you have Section 20 to 22 that talks about accessible income. Then from 23 to 35 that talk about accessible income. Then Section 36 now talks about determining the total accessible income. Now, because you have these sections and there are additions and deductions, because what will be considered deductible by A may not be actually deductible by B. So what you arrive at is supposed to be adequate tax. But what our tax authority, the way they administer tax in Nigeria, the approach is more of a fundraising approach rather than applying the principles of taxation. And what do I mean by that? You see people who voluntarily file their tax returns, and the tax authority or the tax administrators will just arbitrarily add additional income. Now, if you look at the figures that have been put in the public, what that means is that if the governor of Kaduna State, and I believe all governors should be earning the same salary, I mean, the governor, the CEOs of the states actually pay just above 1 million as taxes. While you have that entrepreneur, that business owner, that SME owner who is running up and down, and they voluntarily file their returns, and someone is saying that that is not your income. So what that does is that it actually made people to run away from the tax net. And one of the canons of a good tax system is actually equity. What that means is that everybody should pay the adequate tax commensurable to their income. Now, we know that the tax authority currently receives, let's say, the federal inland revenue and some of the states' internal revenues receive about 4 to 5% of the revenues they generate every month as their running cost or cost of collection, the way is described. Now, looking at this transparency and full disclosure, I think it is time for the tax authority to also start disclosing how those 4% are spent or shared, as the case may be. Because when you say people are not paying taxes, because that is the narrative, the truth is that if you have to analyze the people who are not actually paying taxes, you start from up. And the tax authority, or this chairman of the state internal revenue, also, they have to also disclose their income. Apart from the emolument, just like we see on the pay slips, there are other incomes too they earn.
Such as what?
Which may not be part of their employment.
Are they supposed to pay tax on that?
Yes. So if you are saying, and allowance, Section 2 of the Personal Income Tax define what a personal emolument is, which includes wages, salaries, allowances, and bonuses, perquisites. Now, apart from those statutorily defined emolument, we also know that by the virtue of their positions as chairmen or directors of those institutions, they also earn income or receive income from other sources,